What if I told you the Soviet Union nearly built its own version of the internet in the 1960s, and then spent decades undermining it? In 1952, Sergei Lebedev's MESM became continental Europe's first electronic computer, crunching artillery tables using 6,000 vacuum tubes and consuming 25 kilowatts of power. It could perform 2,000 operations per second, blazingly slow today, but revolutionary then. In 1956, the Strela computer helped plan Gagarin's flight, its 43-bit words streaming data so critical to mission success that its chief designer was awarded Hero of Socialist Labor. By 1965, the BESM-6 emerged a transistor-era machine, putting out 800,000 operations per second, on par with IBM's CDC 3600. Only 355 units were ever built, each costing 530,000 rubles, enough to fund tens of rural schools. Meanwhile, IBM's backlog of System 360s extended across thousands of global customers. Amid this technological promise, cybernetics pioneer Viktor Glushkov had something bigger in mind: OGAS. By 1963, Glushkov was lobbying Kosygin, the Council of Ministers chairman, for a national computer network. OGAS would link Moscow and 200 regional centers, with 20,000 terminals designed to automate planning, logistics, even e-payments, a true nationwide internet. He envisaged bypassing bureaucracy before it swallowed the economy. His ask: 100 billion rubles, a sum that today equates to nearly $850 billion, with a projected five-fold return. Yet despite Politburo support, bureaucratic infighting killed the project. Finance ministers and security agencies saw OGAS less as progress, more as decentralizing power. Once vetoed, OGAS was never funded, and Glushkov was politically sidelined and died in 1982 after pleading ominously, "Ask him for a tank," as his final words about the obstructed project. By the 1970s, planners pivoted to Imitation, the ESEVM series, a Comcon-wide IBM System 360 clone. From 1972 to 1995, over 15,000 mainframes were produced across the USSR, Poland, East Germany, Bulgaria, and others. Minsk's NIAVM and MPOVT became production hubs. But without Western chips and standards, fragmented clones emerged. Each Comecon republic manufactured slightly different buses, cables, and operating systems. Programmers joked that hidden commands in OSES could play the American anthem. In 1986, the Soviet Union had roughly 10,000 computers in service compared to 1,300,000 in the United States. In schools in 1984 came the Agat 7 at 3,900 rubles. It was 20 times the average monthly wage. The Agat ran at 1 megahertz with 96 kilobytes. RAM and Basic Byte magazine called it a bad copy of an Apple. Slow, incompatible, overpriced educators heroically offered minimal programming instruction in crowded classrooms, but the device remained more a badge of progress than a functional tool. Soviet computing rewarded mass rather than function. Factories earned quotas for manufacturing computers. Not whether they worked, ministries often had computers they couldn't network software. Libraries varied city by city, data backups were still kept on carbon paper. While Western businesses and universities moved from punch cards to PCs in the 1980s, Soviet managers still relied on ledgers and paper passes. Even the advent of ES 1841, PC clones, some 83,000 sold, was undermined by slow Soviet hard disk factories, poor expansion ports, and OS incompatibilities. Eastern users watched fax machines, spreadsheets, and email evolve abroad while their offices stayed analog. Gorbachev's perestroika came too late. Markets opened, imports flooded the country, IBM clones and DOS machines overtook SPEVMs. By 1996, over two-thirds of PCs sold in Russia were imported. Soviet-era institutes collapsed. Glushkov's OGAS remained university legend. Factories were left with parts and broken promises. Today, attempts like the Elbrus processor show isolated talent, but their niche Russian tech still carries bureaucratic DNA, slow upgrades, siloed systems, little interoperability. The promise of digital socialism died not from foreign pressure, but internal fear of change. What killed Soviet computers wasn't a lack of genius, it was its fear. Fear of networks that could empower people. The USSR could build a machine, but only if it served the system, not the user. OGAS could have changed everything. Instead, the system chose control over capability, and innovation died in service to ideology. That's why the Soviet computer industry never competed. Not because they lacked engineers or factories, but because they refused to trust their own machines to think.